We continue on here and we move into North Carolina, who have had an interesting 12 months themselves. They finished 5th last year on 39 points, which was 16 points less than 4th place. They lost at Kansas City in the opening round 1-0 in the offseason. They brought in Jaedyn Shaw for $400,000 across allocation money and internal transfer fund. They signed Hannah Betfort as a free agent. They acquired Shinomi Koyama from Sweden in a club record transfer overseas for over $200,000. And they signed one of the top young center backs from college soccer in Brooklyn Courtnall from USC. On the way out, though, the names are maybe even bigger. Former MVP Caroline's time has come to a close with the club. She heads to Man City, and Narumi has signed with the Washington Spirit. Of note, outside of soccer, their 9-year CSO Kurt Johnson has left the club, and on top of Sean Nahas, they still have not filled that role. And Mark Lazary was rumored to be taking over the club as ownership at the end of last year, and then in December sent a letter saying, because of terms of investment, he wouldn't, and that is a cloud over them. Not unknown, Jordan, is what this team likes to do on the field. They are fun to watch.
They are the best possession and passing team in NWSL with a clear style of play. In that requires rotations. And Lori mentioned it earlier. Sometimes they start out of a 3-back, sometimes they start out of 4, but they want their left back to come centrally and create overloads in the middle of the pick. They have pick. What is that? They want to play through the thirds. Their desire is to progress the ball as efficiently and effectively as possible. And when you add some of these pieces in that Goss just mentioned with Jaedyn Shaw, with Hannah Betfort, who's a different 9 than they've had in a long time, this is going to be a North Carolina team, Jill, that is going to up their level, even with the exit of Caroline.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you speak to most coaches in the league, that they would say that North Carolina is the best footballing team. But if you ask them, do they fear North Carolina? I would surmise that a lot of would say no. But I think that it's interesting. The squad is interesting this year because you add in a player like Jaedyn Shaw who could add out wide. She could be in a 10 role. She could be in more of a false 9 that we've seen like a Tess Bodie play from in the past with North Carolina. But I think that Jaedyn Shaw, the biggest question marks I have for her is she going to be willing to defend? Because this North Carolina team is a good defensive team, and they require two-way players in 11 positions all over the field. And can Jaedyn Shaw consistently, we know how talented she is. We've seen what she can do on the attacking side of the ball for the national team. Now, can she bring that into a club setting and do it on a consistent basis, week in, week out? I'm just curious to see in what positions we're going to see her play out wide. Can they isolate her, or is she going to drift inside, look to play off of Ashley Sanchez? But the thing that encourages me the most is that I think Sean Nahas is a really brilliant coach, and you can see how he's elevated a lot of players across his span at North Carolina. One of those players being Kaylee Kurtz, who wasn't drafted by this team, wasn't picked up by North Carolina, and has become one of the best center backs, most consistent, maybe not glamorous, but more stable, reliable players in this league. And I think Sean Nahas is one of the best developers in this league.
Yeah, you could add Ryan Williams to that conversation as well. Yeah. What she's done on that right back position, both of those players, significant minutes. But Kaylee Kurtz, like a 3-time Iron Woman, something like that. I could be
makes me tired.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's really interesting is the acquisition of Hannah Betfort. Because even if you don't get loads of goals from Hannah Betfort, she's at least going to, with her presence and just how she plays the game as a center forward, is going to occupy center backs. And that was the biggest struggle to speak to the point that you made about teams not fearing them. Yeah. And we saw this in their last game in the quarterfinals against Kansas City, is that Kansas City just squeezed them. There was no verticality. Obviously, Caroline was still coming back from injury, but they just had nobody that was able to stretch the game. And so even with just Hannah Betfort's presence, you all of a sudden now open up space for Ashley Sanchez, Jaedyn Shaw, depending on where, even if she starts out wide and comes inside, there's more space, which they haven't had all last season and towards the end of the previous season. So I think that alone is going to be important to give them a different dimension and then be able to create in a way that they want to. Narumi's departure, I think, is actually going to be bigger than maybe anybody thinks. because she was such a focal point in that midfield with her rotations. Her and Denise O'Sullivan playing off one another. There was a really good relationship there. Now, Riley Jackson is a young player that I think can step in and will get more significant minutes. But there's still some pieces that maybe they just needed a shakeup as well. I mean, this team has been together, majority of these pieces for a couple of years now under Sean Nahas. So maybe it's the right movements that needed to happen to give them a lift. But I think, Hannah Betfort, and then what does it look like without Narumi in the midfield?
And to me, how do you play Shaw and Sanchez together?
Yeah, so
with what Jill said is, I think in an earlier episode this year, Goss, I said that the thing about Ashley Sanchez that I feel isn't quite there is her consistency and her defensive responsibilities. She's just like Jaedyn Shaw. She can do so many great things going forward, but Sean Nahas is demanding, and you have to be
and he's
willing.
Spoken vocally about this.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So how can those two work together? And they like to occupy a lot of the same spaces. That's interesting to me, how you can get them on the field together in a creative way.
It does. You go, Jill.
Yeah, just to Lori's point about Hannah Betfort, I think she adds something different that this North Carolina team doesn't have and allows them to play not different, but just give them some different options, especially late in the game. You're chasing a game. You can play those crosses in a little bit more than you would if you had Brianna Pinto, because Hannah Betfort does have a good aerial presence. You can play in behind. We saw her do that against Portland last year, where she exposed Portland in a transition moment in the space behind. So in those later minutes of the game, whether you're down, you're chasing, you're trying to change the game, I think she's something else that can be added.
Great point, Jill.
Love
color out.
Beautiful.
I didn't even want to cut you off if I didn't have to. Absolutely. North Carolina, this is a different team than we thought we'd see 12 months ago. It's a different team than we thought we'd see 2 months ago. They are going to be one of the must-watch teams when we get into the season.